Very good morning to all. I am Dr. Amol Late, Assistant Professor, Department of Environmental Science, Shivneri College, Shirur Antpa, District Latur. In this lecture, we are going to study the concept of introduction to the fresh water. So, as far as our syllabus is concerned, in our unit first, there is a topic, the fresh water. So in this particular topic of fresh water, we are going to study the definition of fresh water, then global distribution of fresh water, and the limitation of the freshwater resources itself. In our previous lecture, we have already discussed the hydrological cycle or the water cycle. And during that lecture, we have covered the distribution or the percentage of water which is get available through this hydrological cycle on our earth surface. So in this freshwater topic, firstly we will see the definition of freshwater. So sometime the student may get confused. So what is meant by the fresh water, or what is the difference, or what is why there is a need to use a term fresh water instead of using just a water. So when we see the definition of fresh water, the fresh water is defined as the water which is having a low salt concentration, which is usually less than 1%, because as we know that whatever the water which is available or present on our earth surface, out of that water near about 97% of water is in the form of ocean or sea water, which is commonly known as a salty water also. Then this fresh water is again having another definition, that is fresh water can be defined as a water with less than 500 parts per million, commonly we known or referred the term ppm, means less than pp 500 ppm of dissolved salts, when the concentration of dissolved salts should be less than 500 ppm or parts per million, that is commonly known as a fresh water. As this water is having some properties, again this water is a binary compound, means two molecules of hydrogen and one molecule of oxygen that get combines to form a water. That's why it is known as binary compound. Bi means two compounds, hydrogen and oxygen is get, we call it as a water mixed with. Then that occurs at a room temperature as a in the form of clear or colorless. Colorless means water is not having any type of color. Then odorless, it should be odorless. Then tasteless, it should be tasteless. Then it is in the form of liquid. Then it when it freezes, it is get converted into the form of ice or snow, that is below 0 degree centigrade. And water always it get boils above 100 degrees Celsius, and it is widely used as one of the solvent. It is also commonly known as water is a universal solvent. In our upcoming lectures, we are also going to highlight or going to study some physical, chemical, and biological properties of water. During that lecture, we are going to discuss in detail with these all physical and the chemical properties. In this context of freshwater, we are only going to highlight these properties. Then this slide talk about the freshwater. Generally, the freshwater is naturally occurring water on the earth's surface in the form of ice sheets, ice caps, glaciers. Specifically in the Himalayan ranges, we are going to observe this water in the form of ice sheets, ice caps, or in the form of glaciers, somewhere in a form of bogs, then generally in the form of ponds, lakes, rivers, and streams, which is generally these are again sources of surface fresh water. And there is another type or another form of fresh water, or the water fresh water is again available in another form, that is known as underground or in a groundwater forms in various aquifers, that is the underground streams, and which is get available to us for our different purposes in the form of tube well, dug well, or in the form of bore well. So this is about the various forms of surface and underground water. Whereas the source of almost all type of fresh water in at water is atmospheric moisture. Then atmospheric moisture means the amount of water vapors which are again present in our atmosphere, that is simply called as a atmospheric moisture. Then soil moisture, the amount of water which is get absorbed by the soil during the process of infiltration or percolation, that water is in the form of soil moisture. And another, or which is commonly occurring form of fresh water or the source of fresh water is our precipitation. And this precipitation which is receiving from the atmosphere in its various form, for example mist, rain, hail, sleet, and snow. So these are some forms of fresh water, or we are getting the water in these type of different forms to our human beings or to the environments also. Again, this fresh water is broadly classified into two types. That is, first, the freshwater sources are again lentic water bodies or lotic water bodies. So what is the difference between these lentic and lotic water bodies? The lentic means a stagnant, or the water which is in the form of stagnant water or standing water, which means it is not flowing or running water. That water bodies are again called as a lentic sources of fresh water. So there are some examples of this lentic water, that is your ponds, lakes, and reservoirs. So these are some representative or prominent examples of lentic waters. Whereas lotic water means the water which is in the form of running water or generally called as a flowing water sources. And these lotic water bodies are again having some examples. We are highlighting these examples. For example, rivers, streams, springs. So these are an example of lotic water resources. So these two different type of water bodies, lentic and lotic, are again very significant for our environment or specifically to the human being for its different uses. We are getting the water from ponds, lakes, reservoirs, rivers, streams, and in the form of spring also. So this is the freshwater habitat, which is again divided into the lentic and lotic water bodies. Then this is the statistic or some figures of our Earth's water distribution. As we know that near about 71% of Earth's surface is covered with water, and because of which if we take an aerial photograph of an Earth, it will reflect the blue color itself, or it is commonly referred as Earth as a blue planet also, because the 71% of Earth's surface is again covered with water. That's why it is known as a blue planet. Then out of this 71% of the Earth's surface which is covered with water, from which 97.2% or approximately we referred or commonly uh, we called as a 97% of water is in the form of ocean or salty water, which is again in the form of seawater, and which is having very large or high salt content in that oceanic water, and because of which we are unable to use this oceanic water or salty water for our any use. It means for domestic or for industrial, for agricultural sector, we can't use this salt water or oceanic water due to its high salt concentration. Whereas the fresh water, which is again near about 2.8% of Earth's water is in the form of fresh water, means the salt concentration of this fresh water or 2.8% of the water is less than only 1%, or another way we call that 500 ppm, less than 500 ppm. Then out of this 2.8% of Earth's fresh water, only 0.8%, means approximately only 1% of water is available for a drinking purpose, or it is a potable water. So this is about the distribution or contribution of Earth's surface or the water which is available to the Earth's surface. Then there is one another important point which is included in this freshwater topic, and which is having an importance as far as the examination point of view is concerned. In most of the time, the point distribution of Earth's water or global distribution of water is again the question is asked on this particular point. So it is nothing but there are three bar diagrams, or just we call as a columns. The first is about the Earth's water, the second is the fresh water, the third is the fresh surface water which is in the form of liquid. So we are going to study one by one. For example, whatever the Earth's water means, we have in last slide we have also studied that near about 71% of Earth portion or surface is covered with water, and out of which near about 97% of water is in the form of saline or in oceanic water. and only 3% of water, which is showing at the top of this bar diagram, that is only 3% of water is available in the form of fresh water. Again, in the next bar diagram or a next column, we are going to study only about this fresh water. We have not focused, we are not going to focus or highlight the 97% of water. We are just talking about the fresh water. So out of this 3% of water or the fresh water, near about 68.7%, means near about 69% of water is in the form of ice caps and glaciers, whereas near about 30% of water is in the form of groundwaters, which is available in the form of different aquifers, and the surface water is only 0.3% of water, and the other form of the water which is available in other form, that is only 0.9%. Means this is the distribution of fresh water, that is a 3% of fresh water distributed in such a way that. Then in a third bar diagram, we are taking only the surface water, which is 0.3%, and the distribution of this surface water, which is 0.3% in a quantity, that the fresh surface water, which is in the form of liquid, in the form of liquid means it doesn't includes the water in the form of glaciers or the snow caps or the ice caps. It is only about the water which is freely available in a liquid form, and out of this 0.3%, lakes having near about 87% of fresh water, means lakes are very significant and they are contributing a large portion of fresh water to the surface water bodies. Then swamps having near about 11%, and the rivers is having 2%, means the lotic water bodies. Means this particular bar diagram or this chart talks about the distribution of Earth's water and how this fresh water is again distributed in its various form. So this bar diagram and the description about this bar diagram is very important as far as your examination is concerned. Then there is another point which is again asked for the short note, that is the importance and need of freshwater management. Actually, this important and need of freshwater management, it becomes another we called as a topic of discussion also. But the weightage of this point in our syllabus is concerned, we are going to just highlight the importance of the freshwater. As we know that there is a no life without water, means water is also called as elixir of life. There is no living organism can survive without water. So water is absolutely essential for life on this planet. It means water is going to support the life on this planet. In some time, we called as the first life or the organism on this earth planet is also originated from water. So it indicates that how the water is very essential ingredient as far as the living organism is concerned, because the survival of any life form, it starts from an insect to the large we call it as a mammals or the human beings also. The survival of any life form, it may be the plants, it may be the mammals, it may be the human beings, it may be the amphibians, rodents. So all life forms are again, their survival or existence is impossible without the water available on the planet earth. Means for the growth or for the different type of their metabolic activities, water is a fundamental, we call it as a component for their growth, survival and existence on the earth surface. So this is the basic about the importance and the need of fresh water. Again, this use of fresh water in a various sector is also become a separate topic for discussion. And in our syllabus, there is unit third is going to focus on the uses of fresh water. So in our daily life or day-to-day activity, we are going to use a large amount of water for our different uses or purposes. Particularly, we take some example like domestic activities for our food preparation purposes, for our drinking purposes or cooking activities, we are using this fresh water. Again, we are using this fresh water for different type of industrial processes. It means during the manufacturing process, that is, or on the process of raw material for the production of different type of byproducts in a various industries, we are going to use that water on a large amount. Then in agricultural sector also, we are going to use this water for irrigation purpose, and which is again important as far as the agricultural production is concerned. Again, this water is useful for different type of sectors or purposes. So in our unit third, we are again going to study the uses of fresh water in a very brief manner or in a very detailed manner. So this importance and a need of fresh water management is becomes one of the, we called as a challenge before the human society. As we are receiving the water during our monsoon period, that is near about only 120 days are again included in a monsoon, that is June to September. Out of these 120 days, we are receiving a water in only near about 30 to 40 days only. And during these 30 to 40 days also, we are getting high rainfall or have average rainfall in, we call as a particular time period only. So after receiving this much of amount of water, there is a challenge before the every country or every nation. It may be the developed country or it may be the developing countries, to use this water resource in a very wise manner, because we can't prepare or we can't generate a water like other resources or we call as a other commodities. That's why the water is only receiving to us from nature or from the hydrological cycle itself. So that's why we have to manage this resource in a very wise manner. Then after studying the need or the importance of freshwater management, there is another point for the short note, or we call it as a short note point of view, that is the limits of global freshwater resources. As in this lecture we have already focused the global distribution of freshwater, here we are going to focus the limitations or the limits of this global freshwater. As we know that, like all other natural resources, in this natural resources, you may take an example of forest resources, energy resources, or wildlife resources. Likewise, the fresh water or water is another important your natural resource, and this global freshwater resource having their own limitations also. As I have already explained that we are receiving the water through the precipitation or through the hydrological cycle itself. There is no alternative to receive a water in a natural way. So that's why this natural resource or like other natural resource, this fresh water is having its own limitation itself. And there is one limit is we call as a decided by the nature itself, to which mankind can draw a water which is available in a various deposits of earth crust without damaging or without damaging the natural resource base or without causing any adverse change in the environment around. Otherwise, there is a if over exploitation of these water resources may be going on a very rapid rate, it may leads to the disappearance of your greenery or the agricultural field. It may going to affect your flora and fauna. Again, it may go undergo a drastic change in our environment, and the process of your desertification may leads due to the over exploitation of the water. And my dear students, as we are living in our Marathwada region, which is also known as a rain shadow region, we are receiving a very low amount of rainfall. That is, we call as on an average we are getting only 700 mm, that is annual rainfall. And once this rainfall is received to us, we have a large number of stress on these water resources for our different purposes. That's why, with considering the limitations of these freshwater resources, we have to use these freshwater resources in a very wise manner or in a wise way. We have to focus on the practices of the rainwater harvesting or the roof water harvesting, rainwater, or we call as a artificial recharge techniques. We have to focus on the water conservation practices beside the plantation activity or the soil conservation activities. We have to conserve or we have to use these water resources in a very sustainable way. So in this topic, fresh water, we have studied or we have focused the definition of fresh water. We have studied the distribution or the global distribution of fresh water in the form of, it may be in the sea water, it may be in the fresh water, again lotic and lentic forms. Their examples also. We have also studied the importance and the need of fresh water, and lastly we have focused on the limitations or the limits of the fresh water. So here we are conclude our fresh water topic. Thank you.